Stop doing these 5 things. Hi, my name is Jason. I'm the YouTube and podcast producer here at Marriage Helper, and today I'm joined by Rolled. Rolled is a Marriage Helper certified coach and a workshop facilitator, and honestly, there's not a lot of things that Rolled doesn't do. But today, Rolled has identified the 5 biggest mistakes that couples make while they're separated, and that's what we're talking about on today's episode of Relationship Radio. Well, Rolled, thanks for being here again today.
Yeah, as always, this is fun. I like doing this.
Yeah, I agree. This is fun. So Rolled is one of our coaches. He is also very involved in workshops. He helps lead and facilitate some workshops. Rolled works with a lot of clients through those 2 things and a lot of other things. Rolled has a lot of hats here. And so today we're going to be talking about the top 5 mistakes that couples make while they're separated. So Rolled, why don't you take it away? What is the first mistake that couples make while separated?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And, like you said, I think this is just from chatting with other coaches, but with a lot of the clients that we've experienced over the last 3 years, a lot of them do end up in separation. I think we've got to just say, like, sometimes you don't have a choice. Like your spouse has just decided, I'm going to separate. Other times, hey, maybe this can help you make a better decision to maybe not separate. So I just wanted to just throw that out there. Sometimes you just don't have a choice because that's what your spouse has decided and you've got to go along with it. But if from our perspective, as far as possible, if you could stay together, even though it's awkward, we have enough strategies and things to help you kind of navigate that. But if you can stay together, that's prize A. But here's a couple of things to consider. If separation is on the cards, or maybe you've already got separated, I think the first one that I see the most is a big emotional overreaction. And that typically comes because, hey, we're hurt. Now this person that I'm spending my life with, now they're out the house or planning to leave and they're going to live somewhere else. And so that hurts. That causes us pain. And if we don't keep that emotion in check, it typically spills out into everything. And so then we start shouting, like, you're this, and we raise our voice because now I'm emotional, I'm upset, which is natural. But those kind of emotions can become really big pushes. And so if we emotionally overreact to what's happening and to what our spouse is doing and their decision, blaming them or maybe doing like excessive crying, all those kind of things, when our emotions are just kind of spilling over, they're going to become extremely big pushes. That might actually push your spouse further away. And so in that case, as you will find out in our Smart Contact Toolkit and even our Calm Toolkit, we need to approach these things from a very calm and composed emotional space. And so that no matter what our spouse is doing, no matter what's happening around us, yes, although it hurts, although it sucks, we can still approach it from a perspective where we can respond rather than react. Reactions typically bite us in the butt somewhere along the line. But if we can respond, it changes everything. If we can respond in calmly and strongly but gently, it goes just a much longer way. So that would be the first one, is just if emotions are super high and we're reacting and just being overly emotional to everything our spouse is doing and saying, and that's just going to create more of a push, which doesn't really look inviting for your spouse to stay home or come home. And so we got to get those emotions in check. All right. So begging, pleading, whining, shouting, blaming, excessive crying, all those kind of things are just typically going to push your spouse away rather than pull. Okay. The second one is something that is going to touch a nerve, but using the kids as a middleman or using the kids as a messenger. And so often, hey, just tell me what mom said, or hey, what did dad do while you were there the whole weekend? And so if we start putting the kids in the middle, irrespective of their age, we have to consider like the impact it's actually going to have on the kids for you to get that kind of information. And so we talk a lot about, hey, you focus on you. You do your pies, and you focus on being the best version of yourself for you. But the spin-off of that is that you can influence your spouse. Now, why I mention that now is because sometimes, and depending on the age of the kids have no filter. And so they're going to talk anyway. But you should not use your kids to spread the news to your spouse. Like, hey, just tell dad how good I am, or just, hey, tell dad how much I've been working on my pies. What you're doing is you're kind of weaponizing the kids in a sense. And the problem is your spouse could even see that as manipulation. And so, as much as possible, we need to shield our kids from unnecessary conflict. And rather, hey, I'm going to use that opportunity to speak directly to my spouse. It becomes an opportunity. Instead of using the kids, sometimes they're just going to talk. That's fine. That's on them. But as much as possible, don't use your kids as your communication. I've seen this in other situations, is that with older kids, maybe like late teens, early 20s, maybe even kids are out of the house, two spouses that are separated will use their kids to communicate. And the problem with that is it becomes a broken telephone situation, because that child is going to interpret it in their way. And then when they tell their other spouse the message, that might be the completely wrong heart, the complete wrong message, the completely wrong tone. And so it doesn't matter what age your kids are at, just don't use them as the middleman, as the messenger. It's going to just cause more conflict, resentment, and your spouse might feel you're manipulating them. And besides, it's just not good for the kids. It's going to have a negative impact on them, because now, instead of them experiencing the conflict in their own way, you are dragging them right into the center of the conflict. And that's no good. All right. So that's the thing, is using the kids as messengers. Third one, and again, I think a lot of these might touch a nerve, but we have to consider financial responsibilities. And so a lot of times what we see is like folks just decide we're going to separate. But they very seldomly consider, like, this is two separate households now that we have to fund and finance. And so this is where if we just react emotionally and we're like, hey, we're going to separate because we can't handle the conflict. What happens is, like, okay, now I've got to fund a new house. I've got to get maybe a second car. I've got to commute further to my house. Oh, no, now we've got to buy extra kids for the kids. We've got to furnish. A lot of times I've seen this, and folks don't consider the costs financially of actually separating. And so we would just suggest is like, and the effect of that is suddenly now, oh, you know what, there's missed payments, there's increased debt. And we know just from a lot of people we've dealt with, and you can go and find this pretty much anywhere, when money is involved, especially debt and financial struggle, that produces a whole lot of stress in the relationship as well. Now you have another thing to fight about. And so beyond just considering the cost of the long-term effect of, like, hey, we've got to fund 2 properties, 2 houses, 2 households, if we're not talking about these things before separating, they cause a lot of surprise, they cause a lot of stress, they cause a lot of issues that we're not thinking about. So I'm going to talk back to, hey, smart contact. We got to manage these business items before we just decide this stuff, like really talk about it. But also I want to say again, we got to talk about calming down. Like, if we're just emotionally making decisions, they will backfire at some point. I can't tell you when and where and how, but at some point they will backfire. Okay. So if we're just going to ignore the financial implications, you're kind of living in a non-reality. And that thing often, from what I've seen, will bite you. It will come back. So rather deal with it well, maturely, and you set your guys up for success if separation is the only choice you have. All right. The fourth one is, often people will be like, okay, we're separated now. So that gives me the opportunity, or the kind of like free pass, to have another relationship. And we see that so often. It's like, oh no, but we were separated when I started this relationship. And we understand, like, I mean, and this just drives home the point I think I mentioned earlier is we have this, or in another podcast, is like, hey, we all have this desire to be together. We have this desire for unity. But firstly, you can rush into another relationship and who knows what baggage and pain and hurt you're carrying into that other relationship. And besides your own issues and struggles, that other person that you're getting involved with, do they know the full truth? Do they know the whole story? But also understand that that person is not perfect and they could have the potential to hurt you as well. So you could find yourself in the situation where you're being hurt in all perspectives, and that can taint your view of marriage, of relationship, of forgiveness and reconciliation. And so those kind of rebound relationships, or maybe it's even a revenge relationship. The problem with that is you can never, ever guarantee that your spouse will hurt exactly the same way that you are hurting. And so those kind of sudden relationships, even if they just start off as friendships, they end up just having a huge impact on you, potentially your kids, because, hey, now we're supposed to be separated, but hey, dad's already or mom's already with this other person. Like what's going on? So you create a whole lot of confusion. You prevent your own healing, you prevent your spouse's healing, you prevent and overall, because this is what we hope for, you prevent the healing of your actual relationship, your marriage. Because what happens if one day you wake up and say, you know what, I want to give my wife or my husband another chance, but now you're involved deeply with another person. Now you've got a whole nother complication to figure out. Whereas, hey, you know what, if separation was the only choice we had, which we would, again, strongly suggest, if you don't have to, don't separate. There's other ways to handle that. But if that was your only choice, give that the chance that it needs for you guys to emotionally calm down, make wise decisions, and then potentially explore what reconciliation could look like. And in our workshop, we talk about a model that will help you explore reconciliation. It's not saying we reconcile and then decide what has to happen. We explore what reconciliation could look like. So I want to strongly encourage you. The workshop's going to put you on the same page, firstly, in communication and a lot of the stuff we've already spoken about. But then we're going to give you an actual pathway you can navigate to work towards potentially reconciling rather than separating and divorce. And we would say, hey, that's at least something that you can, as a different perspective, don't just have the blinkers on like separation and divorce. We are of a mindset that there's other options. There's other solutions other than separation and divorce. Okay. So don't rush into another relationship. That just causes a lot more damage for you and kids and everyone else around you. Okay. And for today, I think the final one would be really just a lack of communication as a whole. And so, or maybe, we don't like using the word boundaries too much, but like, because a boundary can often make someone feel like they've been fenced in. But sometimes we need to be clear on our expectations. Maybe that's a better word, because if we're not clear on our communication and what we're expecting, a lot of times people get disillusioned, they get upset because, hey, now we didn't clear up this fact, but you know what? You're texting me every single day. And that creates a push with your spouse. Whereas if we said, okay, we're going to set an expectation. Okay, we're only going to text each other once a day and we're going to text about this topic. That's an example. Maybe we set an expectation about, hey, no late night calls because I've got the kids in bed and I'm tired. I'm going to be emotional, so that's not going to be really a good conversation. Or hey, and one that we see quite often is that one spouse will just decide at the most random times to have the most inappropriate conversations or topics, and not just sexual in nature, but like they'll phone their spouse at work and start having this huge fight with them while your spouse is at work. All that does is just going to create a big push because now they're emotional, they're focused on work, you're not actually achieving anything. So what I would suggest and what we would suggest is, hey, choose your opportunities well. Don't set clear expectations of how you're going to communicate, when you're going to communicate, and what medium you're going to use. Some people are okay. They don't want to text because text can be misinterpreted, miscommunicated, etc., etc. if there was a way to set this, we would say phone call, that would be prize A. Second, a video call. Third, a phone call, text, email, just because that keeps things clear. But if you never decide that, if you never actually discuss that, then you suddenly surprise your spouse, or your spouse does something that you didn't expect or you hope they did differently, and then it causes another blow up. So the fifth mistake is that we're not setting clear and common, or at least common ground, like finding common ground and expectations on how we're going to communicate, what we're going to do with the kids, when are we going to communicate, what are we going to do with finance. So communication typically breaks down. And that's why we're so big on smart contact. Like, we're going to punt that a lot because it helps us just break this down, and all of what we just spoke about today, to really go, how can we create a lot healthier interactions? How can we come up with specific strategies to communicate better with our spouse, deal with our emotions better, communicate with the kids, allow good conversations, and also working on ourselves. And so the smart contact toolkit is really going to help you guys there. So I'm going to quickly break down the acronym for you, and then I'll let Jason do the rest for you. But SMART stands for stop the pushes. So we want to stop any behavior that's a push. And I'm not going to spoil the toolkit, but that's just in a nutshell. Second one, the M is manage business items. These are the things that absolutely need to be discussed. A is for allow your spouse to talk to you, to initiate conversation, especially relationship talk, because they might not be in that space that you're at, but allow them to communicate. The R is respond strongly, calmly, and gently. Again, if you react emotionally, that's going to be a big push. And then the T is really take it one day at a time and take care of yourself. And then it goes right back to pies. So I want to encourage you, create healthy interactions, healthy communication, avoid some of these common mistakes of separation. But the smart contact toolkit is going to kind of help you navigate that as well. So over to you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Rold. Those were great. So I'm going to walk back through all five just briefly so that we make sure that we get all of them. So the first one was avoid a big emotional overreaction. Try to just avoid pushes altogether, because having an emotional overreaction will make that way easier. Yeah. You talked a lot about smart contact just now and the calm toolkit. The second was using your kids as a messenger. Avoid that. That's manipulation. You're weaponizing the kids. Not a good thing at all. No. The third thing is the financial costs and implications are often looked over. That can introduce a lot of stress. You're missing bills, missing payments, all of that. The fourth one is rushing into another relationship. That can cause a lot of damage. There's a lot of baggage there. And the fifth one was the lack of communication expectations. Just making sure that those, we don't like to use the word boundaries, but making sure those expectations are set when it comes to communication if you are separated. But I want to encourage you, if you are separated, we have seen thousands of couples go from separated to reconciled, and there is always hope. Rold mentioned a lot about the Smart Contact Toolkit and the Calm Toolkit, as well as our workshop. So the good thing about it is if you sign up to go to one of our 3-day workshops, you actually get a year's worth of membership, which is where those toolkits are included in your workshop. So to learn more about about our 3-day workshop, you can go to marriagehelper.com/book now. You can speak to a workshop advisor, and they will help guide you through that process. And see what we can offer to get you into one of these workshops. So, Rold, thank you so much for being here again today.
Yeah, appreciate that, Jason. And just to your point, and sorry, I'm interrupting here, but
no, go ahead.
Exactly like you said, and maybe this comes across like, oh no, we're doomed if we're separated. No, not at all. Jason hit it nail on the head. There is always hope. And we have hundreds of stories of people that have, like, from separation gone to reconciliation. So that was a great way to end it. And yeah, totally agree. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We'll see you on the next episode.